You're standing in your backyard turning a compost pile that smells like something died in it. You added browns last week to balance the greens. You're aerating every 2 weeks like the gardening books say. You're monitoring moisture. You're keeping pests out. And after 6 months of babysitting this pile, you've got maybe half a bin of usable compost. Meanwhile, you threw away the chicken bones and cheese because your pile can't handle proteins. You're doing everything right. Except, you're not. You're managing a biological process that should manage itself. Japanese farmers solved this 400 years ago using fermentation instead of labor. 4-week cycle. While you were sleeping. Let's add up what your compost pile actually costs you. You turn it twice a month. That's 30 minutes each time if you're efficient and don't stop to contemplate your life choices while leaning on a pitchfork. 12 hours per year just on turning. Add another hour per month monitoring moisture levels, adding browns to fix that ammonia smell, and troubleshooting why the center isn't heating up like the internet said it would. That's another 12 hours annually. Add the time you spend explaining to your neighbor why your yard smells like a crime scene every other weekend. You're spending 24 hours per year minimum managing a biological process that happens automatically in every forest on Earth without human intervention. And after all that labor, you wait 6 to 12 months for finished compost. Maybe. If you didn't mess up the carbon to nitrogen ratio, if it didn't get too wet during that week it rained, if the raccoons didn't excavate it looking for apple cores. Here's the math you're not doing. You're composting roughly 40% of your household organic waste. You can't add meat scraps. No dairy. No fats or oils. No citrus because someone on a forum said it kills worms. No cooked food because it attracts pests. The rest goes in the trash, straight to the landfill. You just spent 24 hours per year managing a pile that rejects 60% of your kitchen waste and takes 12 months to give you maybe 30 gallons of usable material. Think about it. You're running a part-time job for decomposition. You're not gardening. You're babysitting biology that doesn't need supervision. Now let's talk about the infrastructure cost nobody mentions when they're selling you on backyard composting. You bought a bin. Maybe a tumbler if you fell for the marketing about easier turning. That's $80 to $300 depending on how fancy you went. You bought a pitchfork or aerating tool. Another $30. You bought a compost thermometer because you read that monitoring temperature is important. $20. You bought bags of brown material because you ran out of leaves in winter. You bought amendments when things went wrong. Lime to adjust pH, nitrogen booster when it wasn't heating. Add it up. You're at $200 to $400 in infrastructure and amendments to produce 30 gallons of compost per year. You could buy premium compost from a landscape supplier for $8 per cubic yard and skip the entire operation. But here's what really gets me. You're managing a process that nature perfected millions of years before humans existed. Walk into any forest. The ground is covered in leaves, fallen branches, dead animals, everything. Nobody turns it. Nobody monitors the carbon to nitrogen ratio. Nobody adds amendments or checks moisture levels. And somehow it all breaks down into rich humus that feeds the trees. The forest composting system runs on neglect. Your backyard system runs on constant intervention. You're working harder than nature to achieve worse results. That's not gardening wisdom. That's marketing success. Let's be clear about what you're actually getting. After 6 to 12 months of turning, monitoring, and troubleshooting, you get finished compost. It's broken down organic matter. Good stuff. Useful for improving soil structure and water retention. But it's not magic. It's not transformative. It's just decomposed material. You spent 24 to 40 hours of labor to produce something that provides modest benefits to your garden. A 3 cubic foot bag of quality compost from a municipal facility cost $12 and required 0 hours of your time. You're not composting because it's economically rational. You're composting because someone convinced you it's what real gardeners do. Here's what most people miss. Bokashi isn't composting. It's controlled anaerobic fermentation using beneficial microbes. Completely different biology. Completely different system. Composting requires oxygen. That's why you turn the pile, to add air. The aerobic bacteria need it to survive and break down material. They work slowly, 6 to 12 months slowly. Fermentation eliminates oxygen. You seal everything in a bucket. Anaerobic microbes take over. They ferment the material in weeks. Same biological principle as making sauerkraut, kimchi, or yogurt. You're not managing a pile in your backyard. You're running a fermentation factory in a 5-gallon bucket that fits under your kitchen sink. Here's how it actually works. You get 2 5-gallon buckets with tight sealing lids and a bag of Bokashi bran. The bran is wheat bran or rice bran inoculated with beneficial microbes, primarily lactobacillus and yeast, the same stuff that ferments yogurt and beer. You layer kitchen scraps in the bucket. Vegetable peels, coffee grounds, eggshells, meat scraps, cheese, bread, citrus, oils, literally anything that came from something that was once alive. Every time you add a layer, you sprinkle a handful of Bokashi bran over it, maybe 2 tablespoons. Press the material down with your hand or a plate to remove air pockets. Seal the lid. Repeat daily for 2 weeks until the bucket is full. Then you seal it completely and let it ferment for another 2 weeks while you start filling the second bucket. That's it. 4 weeks from kitchen scrap to soil-ready amendment. Think about it. Traditional composting can't handle proteins, fats, or dairy because aerobic decomposition of those materials creates anaerobic pockets that smell like death and attract every pest in a 3-block radius. Your pile becomes a buffet for raccoons, rats, and flies. Bokashi thrives on that material. The anaerobic fermentation process actually prefers proteins and fats. You're composting 100% of your kitchen waste instead of 40%. Every coffee ground, every chicken bone, every piece of cheese that went bad in the back of your fridge, every moldy tortilla, every scrap of leftover lasagna, all of it goes in the bucket. All of it ferments. None of it goes to the landfill. You just tripled your waste diversion rate by doing less work. But here's where it gets interesting. The speed difference is almost offensive to traditional composters. Traditional aerobic composting takes 6 to 12 months minimum to produce finished compost, if you're doing everything right. If you turn it religiously. If you balance your greens and browns like you're running a chemistry lab. Bokashi fermentation takes 2 weeks in the bucket, plus another 2 to 4 weeks after you bury it in your garden soil. Total timeline from kitchen to soil-ready material? 4 to 6 weeks. You just collapsed a year-long process into a month, and you spent maybe 5 minutes per week doing it. Dump scraps, sprinkle bran, seal lid. That's the entire maintenance protocol. No turning, no monitoring moisture levels, no troubleshooting why the temperature dropped. No balancing carbon and nitrogen ratios like you're preparing for the SATs. You eliminated 90% of the labor and cut the timeline by 75%. Add the time reclamation because this matters more than people realize. Traditional composting requires 3 to 4 hours per month between turning, monitoring, troubleshooting, and adding amendments when things go wrong. And things always go wrong. Too wet, too dry, not heating, smells wrong, attracting pests, not breaking down fast enough. Bokashi requires 5 minutes per week. Dump scraps in bucket, sprinkle bran, press down, seal. That's it. You just reclaimed 14 hours per month. 56 hours over a 4-month growing season. 2 full days of your life back. 2 days you can spend actually designing garden beds, planting polycultures, observing soil biology, doing the work that actually matters instead of managing waste like it's your second job. Now let's talk about what you're actually producing, because this is where the difference becomes profound. Fermented Bokashi material isn't compost, it's pre-compost. The material is pickled, not decomposed. It looks like garbage that's been sitting in vinegar for 2 weeks, because that's essentially what it is. The lactobacillus bacteria produce lactic acid during fermentation. Same acid that makes yogurt tangy and pickles sour. When you open that bucket after 2 weeks, it smells sharp and acidic. Not pleasant, but not putrid either. More like opening a jar of sauerkraut. When you bury that fermented material in your garden soil, something remarkable happens. It breaks down rapidly because the fermentation process already started the breakdown and inoculated the material with billions of beneficial microbes. You're not just adding organic matter to your soil, you're adding a probiotic, like the kind people spend $12 on at Whole Foods, except this one feeds dirt instead of your intestines. The lactobacillus and yeast in the fermented material colonize your soil and feed the existing soil biology. Your soil microbiome explodes within weeks. Here's the reality. Earthworm populations increase because they love partially fermented material. It's easier to digest than raw scraps or finished compost. Beneficial fungi networks expand. Mycorrhizal connections strengthen between plant roots and soil organisms. You just shifted from adding inert material to actively building living soil. That's the difference between composting and fermentation. Compost is finished. It's done breaking down. Stable. Inert. You add it for physical structure and water retention. Bokashi is active. It's still breaking down. When you bury it, the decomposition process feeds soil microbes directly. You're not improving soil structure. You're feeding the entire underground ecosystem. Let's talk about waste reduction, because the numbers matter. Traditional composting handles maybe 40% of your household organic waste if you're disciplined. Vegetable scraps, fruit peels, coffee grounds, leaves, grass clippings, that's about it. Everything else gets rejected by the system. Bokashi handles 100%. Meat, bones, dairy, cheese, fats, oils, cooked food, bread, pasta, sauces, citrus, onions, everything. That moldy container of leftover curry in the back of your fridge? Bokashi. The chicken carcass after you made stock? Bokashi. The rancid butter you forgot about? Bokashi. You just eliminated 60% of your organic waste stream that was going to the landfill. In most households, that's 15 to 20 pounds per week. Over a year, that's 700 to 1,000 pounds of organic material diverted from landfills and turned into soil food instead. And you're doing this with continuous production. Traditional composting is batch processing. You build a pile, you manage it for months, eventually it finishes, you harvest it, you start over. There's always a waiting period. Bokashi is continuous flow. You always have one bucket filling and one bucket fermenting. Every 2 weeks, you harvest finished material and restart the cycle. You're never waiting. You're never without production capacity. Now let's talk about exact implementation, because you can start this in the next 48 hours. You need 2 5-gallon buckets with tight sealing lids. You can buy Bokashi-specific buckets with spigots at the bottom to drain excess liquid for $30 to $40 each. Or you can use regular food-grade buckets from any hardware store for $8 each and add Gamma Seal lids for another $6 if you want easier opening. I'd start with the cheap hardware store buckets. You don't need fancy equipment. You need sealed containers. You need Bokashi bran. Buy it online. Search for EM1 Bokashi bran or Lactobacillus inoculant or Effective Microorganisms Bokashi. A 5-pound bag costs $15 to $25 and lasts 3 to 6 months, depending on how much waste you generate. Most households go through one bag every 4 months, so you're looking at $60 to $75 per year on bran. You can also make your own bran if you want. Mix wheat bran with EM1 solution, let it ferment for a week, dry it out, store it. Costs maybe $8 per batch. But buying it ready-made is easier when you're starting. Here's the 2-bucket rotation system. Bucket 1 is active. It lives under your kitchen sink or next to your trash can. Every time you have kitchen scraps, you open bucket 1, dump the scraps in, sprinkle 2 tablespoons of Bokashi bran over the top, press everything down with your hand or a plate to remove air pockets, close the lid firmly. Takes 30 seconds. After 2 weeks of daily additions, bucket 1 is full. You seal it and set it in your garage or back porch to ferment for 2 weeks. Now you move bucket 2 to active position under your sink and start the same process. By the time bucket 2 is full 2 weeks later, bucket 1 has finished fermenting. You take bucket 1 to your garden, bury the contents, rinse the bucket, and it becomes your next active bucket. Continuous rotation. Using the finished fermented material is simple. Dig a trench in your garden bed about 8 to 10 inches deep. Pour in the fermented scraps. They'll look like pickled garbage. Some pieces recognizable, some broken down, everything acidic smelling. Cover immediately with soil. The material breaks down in 2 to 4 weeks underground. Don't plant directly into fresh bokashi. That's the one rule. The acidity will burn plant roots. Let it break down first. Or you can add it to raised beds a month before planting season. Mix it into the top 8 inches of soil and let it sit. Or you can bury it around established trees and shrubs as a slow-release fertilizer. Dig a ring trench around the drip line. Pour in bokashi, cover with soil. The tree roots will find it. But here's where I lose some of you. Someone's going to object that bokashi isn't real compost. They're correct. It's not. It's better. And I mean that specifically. Finished compost is stable organic matter. It's done breaking down. The microbes have consumed all the easily available nutrients. What's left is humus, stable carbon, good for soil structure, good for water retention, relatively inert. You're adding bulk, not biology. Fermented bokashi is active organic matter. It's still breaking down. When you bury it, the decomposition feeds soil microbes directly in real time. The lactobacillus, yeast, and organic acids in fermented bokashi stimulate existing soil biology like nothing else. You're not adding finished product, you're adding fuel for the underground workforce. Your earthworm population will explode within a month of your first bokashi burial. They'll congregate around the fermentation zone and process the material rapidly. Beneficial fungi networks will extend toward the buried bokashi because the decomposition creates nutrient hotspots. The entire soil food web activates. You shifted from adding matter to catalyzing biology, from importing structure to growing ecosystem function. That's not semantics. That's a fundamental difference in what you're doing. Here's what to do if you already have a traditional compost pile sitting in your backyard right now. Let it finish naturally. Don't touch it. Stop adding to it. It'll break down on its own eventually. Use that material when it's ready in 6 months or a year, but stop feeding it. Start your bokashi system today. Order 2 buckets and a bag of bran right now. They'll arrive in 3 days. Start fermenting your kitchen waste immediately. In 6 months, you'll look at that old compost pile and realize you haven't thought about it once. You won't miss turning it. You won't miss monitoring it. Here's the exit path. Stop turning. Start fermenting. The math is clear. Biology doesn't lie. Traditional composting was designed for farms with space, time, and labor to spare. You have a suburban backyard, 40 hours per week at work, and weekends you'd rather spend anywhere except managing decomposition. You're not lazy for choosing bokashi. You're not taking shortcuts. You're smart. You're recognizing that the old method was designed to create work, not results. It was designed to sell you bins and tools and amendments and thermometers and aerating equipment. The entire traditional composting industry exists to keep you busy managing a process that shouldn't need management. Real gardening is designing systems that work while you sleep. Systems that feed themselves. Systems that improve over time without constant intervention. This is what that looks like. 2 buckets under your sink. 5 minutes per week. 100% of your organic waste turned into soil food. Your garden getting healthier every season because you're feeding the biology instead of fighting it. That's not less than traditional composting. That's better. That's what indigenous systems understood 400 years ago. Work with biology, not against it. Design, don't dominate. Let the microbes do what they've been doing for millions of years, while you actually garden.